You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. Hello there, and thank you so much for joining me today for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. My name is Felicia. I am a self-care specialist as well as a certified astrologer, and every week I come here to share just a little bit from within, something that is hopefully encouraging and inspiring. And I want to be honest with you guys, I have not planned what I'm about to talk about today. Normally, I've been doing this podcast once a week without fail for the past, it's been about 3 years. My podcast anniversary is in April of 2020. So we are on the 3rd year. And normally I like to come in with a message mostly planned. Of course, there's something that comes from just sitting down and pouring your heart out. But lately, I've been kind of shooting from the hip just because I'm going through so much change in my life and there's so much up for me right now. And so because of that, I'm just doing my best I can to get through everything right now. And that includes sitting down for the podcast. And I have to share a few things. One is the amount of guilt that I'm feeling right now. And I wanted to touch on this today because, one, I think guilt is something that we all have felt, sometimes something we feel every single day. We imagine that people have certain expectations of us, and when we feel like we can't meet those things, it is very normal to feel guilty. And I'm feeling a lot of guilt right now. I'm feeling guilty for those in my Patreon who have been so patient with me with our live yoga classes and meditations. And, in February, we started a book club, and that quickly had to get put on hold just because it was end of February when I went through a career change, got a new job, and then we started getting the house ready to sell, and then it sold, and then boom, now here we are. It's mid-April. The last 6 weeks have been completely insane. And I can't believe we're already here. This is the week that we move out of our Colorado house. It is happening right now. In fact, all around me in this room right now is just stuff that needs to be packed. And it is driving me a little batty. I will say that I was feeling really good up until this weekend when everything started coming off the walls and stuff started getting put into boxes and piles were being made of, donations, try to sell, keep, box up, those kind of things. And as soon as the visual stability left the picture, I feel like my body started going into fight or flight. And it's something that I haven't quite experienced before, where my body feels so anxious right now, but my mind feels rather calm. I don't know if that totally makes sense, but I noticed this weekend, just even going up a flight of steps, like my heart was racing a lot more. I could easily just spill into tears. There's just a lot of emotions that my body is trying to work through and release right now. And on top of it, there's the body stress of just being exhausted right now. I feel absolutely bone tired, and I'm working this week on top of moving, and maybe that was a stupid thing to do in hindsight, but it just felt like the right thing to do with needing probably some time off later this week with actually being in the car and driving off. So anyway, I'm doing the best that I can right now. And I do feel like there is a lot of things that I'm just feeling very mentally steady on. I feel like the universe is giving me green lights everywhere I turn. Today I had to go and run a quick errand. I had to go drop off our bicycles. We donated them to a wonderful nonprofit over in Golden, and they're going to be going to refugees, which I thought was really cool. And when I went there, she totally knew the city that we're heading to, and it felt really great just to have that conversation with her. And it just feels like there's little signs everywhere. But that said, it still doesn't take away the stress of packing your life up into little boxes and trying to make decisions in one moment of everything that you will, either regret not taking or maybe the opposite, like regret taking. It's very hard to move through change, and it's hard to process it mentally. It's hard to process it physically. It's hard to process it emotionally, that's for sure. And I suppose where I'm at with it all is just understanding that that's part of the process. Understand that I'm probably not doing this perfectly, that if I could do it again once I get through it, that I will have things that I would have done differently. And what I'm really trying to do is be accepting of that process, that I'm not perfect, I'm not going to get this 100% right, and that I'm doing the best that I can. And I'm really trying to validate that experience for me. And I guess what I'll say as I open this up, I want to address the question that everyone's been asking me right now, which is, where are you going? And I will just say that for the first time in my life, I feel like I am able to have a little bit of privacy. I am usually such a wear my heart on my sleeve kind of person. I'm a very, I'm public with the things I experience and go through. I mean, heck, I have a podcast and I'm sharing with you guys right now. And I've always been very upfront about every part of my life. And for some reason, with this move, I just feel like I want to keep it close to my own heart right now. And I'm not trying to keep anything from anyone or be cryptic on purpose. It's more just that I'm really trying to lean into the fact that it's my decision. And I have to say that, so I was, in college when Facebook came out. And for a long time, I've lived in this world where the big changes in my life, I just posted about on social media, whether it was moving or buying this house or starting a business or being in a relationship, like all of these life changes, you just post them and you're happy to share with people, and then people can just watch your life through this little social media window. And for this chapter of my life, I'm getting older, I'm living with so much more intention, and I just have a different relationship now with social media than I did in the past. Now, I'm not hating on social media at all. I think that is an amazing tool. I've grown an amazing platform on TikTok talking about astrology, and that has been incredible. I would say that podcasting is a social media channel in some ways, or at least a connection tool to reach a different audience, to have this long form conversation. It's something I'm such a huge fan of, and I love sharing this moment with you. So I'm not saying that social media is bad, but what I didn't want was to post this online and then, one, just have an onslaught of questions that I can't get to all right now. Two, to feel like I have an obligation to answer those things publicly over, Facebook posts. I don't know that I feel that way right now. Like, I feel very strongly that I have the right to my own privacy. And three, we've all been there, right? Like, when people post things online, it's public information. It's out there for everyone to see, and anyone can go look up where you're moving, look where you're at, look how much you paid for your house, like look up all of these things. And I just want to protect myself as I move through this process. And so I hope that makes sense. And I hope that that as soon as I get fully landed, as soon as we close on our next house, as soon as I have some updates to share and I'm ready for it, when my heart is ready to share that information, that I cannot wait to share the next chapter of my life with you. And I will say that for anybody else out there who's dealing with this kind of thing, whether you are moving yourself or considering a new job or thinking about quitting a job or thinking of starting a family or having a baby or maybe even getting ready to give birth or whatever it is. I hope that you know that you don't have to post things online because people expect it of you. As soon as I listed on Facebook, I shared that our house was for sale just to, I wanted to put it out there into the universe like, hey, we're selling our house. And if anybody knows anybody, send them our way. And that was my main reason for sharing our house being sold on social media. And I tell you, the second that I hit post, it was like, where are you going? Where are you going? Where are you going? And I know that people aren't thinking twice about it when they're asking that question. I know that people mean it with love. I know that that's the intention behind it. And let's be honest, there is a fine line here, because you have to ask yourself, do you want to know because you genuinely want to know because you care about where I'm going? Or are you just kind of being nosy? And I mean that I'm not being rude about that. I'm just saying, I think there's many of us that are just nosy, that just love to know where other people are going and have that kind of pulse on other people's lives. And that is the part that I am trying to take out of the equation. And the part that I will say, which is why if you are thinking about something like this and you feel obligated to post it on social media, and I'm just encouraging you that you don't have to do it before you're ready, and you don't have to share what everybody else shares. You are allowed to be in control of what you share publicly, and that is your right. And the really cool part about it is that instead of just posting it where tons of people can see it and then they already know something about my life, instead I get to be the one when I'm having conversation with people, and they get to hear it from me. They get to hear it from my words, engage in a conversation with me, instead of reading about my life without me. Does that make sense? And I will say that it's been the coolest experience. It has been nothing but positive. Every time I'm able to share my news with somebody that I'm chatting with, it feels like a genuine moment of connection. And that feels so starkly different than the times in my past where stuff has been posted online that people already knew about when I got to that conversation, where it was like, oh yeah, I heard you're moving. And I guess what I've realized is that those moments just feel like gossip. Like, even though they've heard it from me through my posts online, it still feels like they're hearing that way through gossip instead of a point of connection. And so while I'm in this transitional period, I'm just enjoying the moments of intimacy. And I'm going to continue to enjoy those moments as the next few weeks unfold. We are not slated to close on our new house until sometime in May. So I'm going to be in this little kind of cocoon from this week when we leave until we close on our new house. And then I'm going to take you guys on that journey with me, and I can't wait. And I'm so grateful to have this moment to share this. In fact, if it takes me back to what I was saying at the beginning about guilt, just being able to say this out loud and share my why on that with you has kind of eased that guilt a little bit. Because to be honest, I have felt extremely guilty about my choice. Even though I feel good about my choice, I feel guilty for the choice that I'm making. Maybe we need to normalize that as well. But there's other things I feel guilty about. I feel guilty that I haven't, literally, there are not enough hours in the day to make time for all of the people who haven't heard that I'm leaving and who would love to meet up. And I hope you know, if you're one of them, that I love you so much, and I am so sorry that we couldn't squeeze that in. I literally do not have enough hours in the day right now. It feels like what I'm working with are like a good 8 hours a day. That I don't know how 24 is turning into 8, but that's what it feels like between trying to pack up the house and manage the dogs and plan everything for this, out of state move, and work and, wrap up things with the business. And it's been a lot, and a lot has had to happen very quickly. So please know that I so wish that we could have met up, and I feel you, and I know that we're all going to stay in touch. So please don't worry about that. I'm always going to have roots here in Colorado. I'm sure I will be back to visit. And, the other thing that I will say that I'm working through right now is the fact that I think that there's like a generational trauma around that's naturally passed down to each of us from the cross-country moves of our past or the past. I don't know if this is because I'm a millennial and I grew up in a time before FaceTime and internet and email, and those kind of things. I mean, I came into those things, but I actually had to have my therapist remind me of this, that being separated from the people that you love and you connect with is not the same as it used to be. In some ways it used to be, you say goodbye to people and you hope that you get a letter from them, or you hope that you can plan for or budget a long distance phone call. I remember this, like being separated was very challenging. It was very hard to stay connected. And, even though we've had a good, 20 plus years of, cell phones and not having to pay extra to talk long distance, and then texting and, FaceTiming and all of these things, it still feels like there's like this generational thing inside of us that we are afraid. We're afraid to say goodbye. We're afraid that the distance means something. That I truly feel like if we look at the tools of connection now, we can acknowledge that, yeah, I'm not saying it's the same. I know it's not the same as being able to meet up for lunch or grab coffee or whatnot. But I guess the very practical part of me is like, how often do those things happen? And the point of those things happening is to connect. And we can connect, like that all comes down to intention. It doesn't matter where you live now. If the intention is there, you can stay connected. And I'm very much comforted by that. And I will say it's kind of helping with some of that guilt of saying goodbye to so many of my loved ones. But it's incredible because, for example, so much of why we're finally doing this instead of having already done it is because I ran a business where I had to be in person in Colorado with clients. And now that I have chosen to button that up and move forward, I have a lot of choices and I work remote. And the coolest part is that I didn't even have to think twice for if I can keep up with A Bit From Within, because everything is done virtually online right now. And it is amazing. It is so amazing and cool to me that that's not an area of my life that I have to say goodbye, because I get to stay connected and I get to keep up the podcast and I get to keep up with our live yoga sessions. And in fact, I get to do it in a better way because I'm actually going to have space to film it. And I'm so excited because I know that this move is me stepping into something that I have been craving for so long, that I have been denying myself for so long because of my circumstances. And as soon as I decided to button up my business and transition careers and now make this move, like all of these things are so intricately connected. They're like the long edges of a spider web or something. They're such important pieces for me being able to step into greater alignment with myself and with my soul. And I'm just so excited because I know that the second I get through all of this temporary transition, that I truly believe that I'm just going to settle into this new place where like I can show up and I can be an awesome yoga teacher and I can be an awesome astrologer and I can have some kick-ass podcast episodes and make great TikToks and enjoy everything. Like I'm just so excited because the things that are stressful, hear about where I live, about how much wasted time I feel like I have each day because of how long it takes to get anywhere in Denver, and of all of the directions that I'm pulled here, a lot of that is going to be simplified. And I'm so freaking excited. I'm so excited. One thing I will share with you guys is that the house that we are going to be closing on in just a few more weeks and getting has just a beautiful yard. And well, it has the potential for a beautiful yard. I should say it used to be a very beautiful yard, and it's been getting a little beat up over the years. It's actually been vacant for a while, and so it needs some love and some TLC, but I'm so excited for that. You know, it's like my Taurus moon is just desperate to get its hands dirty and to be out there in the yard. I'm so excited. So I hope all of that said, I guess to make me feel better about my guilt, I hope that you guys know that if you can hang in there with me through this transition, that it's going to be worth it. I'm going to have some amazing content coming up. And I will say that that's one of the things that, again, as we talk about, I guess this podcast is turning into an interesting theme. But if one of the themes of this are the permissions that you're allowed to give yourself, it's like give yourself the permission to step into alignment with your true self. And anytime you do that, there are going to be naturally things that fall away that you're allowed to have some guilt about. You know, it's okay for me to feel guilty because other people have expected me to stay a certain way. And I no longer choose that, and I feel a little bit guilty for it. That's okay. It's a normal feeling. It's part of the process. And it is so cool that I am finally able to give myself that permission to do it anyway. And that is what takes courage. You know what I mean? Now, I will say, I know that most of you guys are not getting ready to move across the country. Maybe this will land across a few people someday in the future that are going through something similar. But all of this can be applied to our everyday life. Even if you're not going through a huge outer change, there are so many of us, especially this time of year in spring, when things are finally starting to get stirred up and change comes in small and big packages, but sometimes even small change can feel like a big deal in your own life. And these elements that we're talking about, this permission for you owning how you want to do it, your right to your privacy, your right to what you share, your right to tell your story, your right to do it your way, your right to have some things fall away it's your choice. Or maybe even sometimes not, but something you have to move through in order to receive where you want to go. These are all fundamental parts that you're going to experience in one way or another as you deal with your current circumstances or you go through change in your life. Now, I touched on this a little bit last week with our Astro check-in, but we are just about 10-11 days away from the first solar eclipse of this year. It's the solar eclipse that's happening during the Aries new moon. And this is an interesting one because not only is it a solar eclipse, but it's the second Aries new moon of the year. Now, what you might not know is that that's pretty rare. It maybe happens once a year where we'll have a double new moon in the same zodiac sign. But most of the year, every single new moon is in a new zodiac sign. Last year, I think the double new moon might have been in Cancer. It was either last year or the year before that. This year, it's happening in Aries. And we had one right in March, like right during the same exact time as the spring equinox. And this time we're having it again. Now, what's interesting is whenever a double new moon happens in the same zodiac sign, it's interesting because the only way that can happen is if the first new moon happens at like 0 or 1 degrees of the sign, And again, I try not to make the astro check-in too overly technical when it comes to the astrology piece. But if you're wondering what I'm referring to as degrees, in astrology, it's a big circle around the earth. So we know that circles are 360 degrees, and there are 12 zodiac signs. So those each are split into 30 degrees each. So 12 times 30 equals 360. And that's how we get those degrees and the big circle and all the zodiac signs. So and 0 and 1, it's kind of funny because in astrology, the other thing you have to know is that the degrees there are 30 degrees, but instead of being listed 1 to 30, instead they're listed as 0 to 29. So that said, the first new moon would have to happen at 0 or 1 degree of the sign, and then they would move through the zodiac sign, and then at the very end, when the sun and moon would align, is at the very end, probably the 29th or maybe 28th degree of that same sign. And the journey, if we think about the different zodiac degrees, there's a journey that happens there as well. There's like a journey that happens through the zodiac. So Aries starts the zodiac, and as we travel through the zodiac, there's like a maturity that happens. We move from being more I focused in Aries to being more we focused, more actually divine, like Om, that kind of focus when it comes to Pisces at the very end. So, and then everything in between is a growth. And we can think of that exact same thing even with the degrees. So at the beginning of the degrees, the first new moon that's right at the front end is going to be somewhat unexpected, somewhat more going into things with fresh eyes, with no kind of wisdom on that matter, right? Like it's kind of like the Fool card in tarot. But by the end, there's much more wisdom. There's a chance to look back with wisdom, with saying, I've learned so much and I'm not the same person as I was because I've really been saturating myself with these lessons. And this has come up again because it's our second opportunity to really capitalize on what those lessons are. Now, this is the interesting part. This is the second new moon that is happening in this double, like the Aries. It's happening at the end degrees of Aries. But it's also our first solar eclipse of this new set of eclipses that are going to be happening in the Aries and Libra axis for the next 18 months. But it's not the only part of the conversation. This whole year, we're straddling the lines between the Aries and Libra, and then also this Taurus and Scorpio axes for these eclipses. So instead of having, like what normally would happen, is we'd have an Aries solar eclipse and then we'd have a Libra lunar eclipse. Those would be 2 weeks apart, and then we'd do the same thing in the fall. We'd have a Libra solar eclipse followed by an Aries lunar eclipse, and that would be the story. That's what's been happening within Taurus and Scorpio for the past year or so. So now we're changing it up, and we're starting with this Aries solar eclipse, but we're 2 weeks later, we're bookending with this Scorpio lunar eclipse. So if I haven't lost you yet, what I'm trying to say is it's almost like we're having 1 foot in one door and 1 foot in the other door. There are brand new things are going to be coming into your life right now, both consciously and unconsciously. There are going to be things that are changing. Like for me, I talked about this a little bit last week, but like going to change and move to a new place and buy a new house and start this new life, like this is absolutely a conscious new beginning. And at the same time, there are going to be really big pieces of my life that are closing, that are afoot in a different world. And there are going to be themes for me that are coming up with the lunar eclipse, that is happening in Scorpio a couple of weeks later. But this is happening for all of us right now. And if you aren't sure what is going on in your life or what things are starting and going, what I want you to remember as we move towards this, and I will hopefully be able to talk about this next week because it will be much closer to this. But it's not a good idea to manifest during eclipses. It's better to take inventory. So I would say it's not that you can't desire things or want things. It's just a matter of understanding that you don't want to purposely, consciously manifest things because it'll keep the energy of the eclipse, the unpredictability of the eclipse. So instead, take that inventory and actually just pay attention to what's happening, what's pulling at your focus, and this will help significantly. And I have to laugh a little bit and apologize if some of this feels like a repeat from last week, because I am running on very little brain power right now, and I am a little overtired. So I might be repeating myself a little bit, but I will say that maybe this is a reflection or a mirror of kind of like the double new moon, right? Is sometimes we have to hear things again in order for them to sink in. And sometimes we have to say them a second time as well in order for them to sink in. So again, I just want to say thank you for bearing witness to my story. And I know I've been talking a lot about the move and things like that, but guess what? Next week, I will specifically share the story of how the road trip to get where I'm going goes. It's going to be my mom coming with me and the 2 dogs in the car. Dave is the one that gets to fly out there ahead of time, and then we'll be soon following. So I'm sure we'll have some wonderful stories from the road, and it'll be a whole different perspective to do my first podcast from my new state. And if you bear with me this next month, I promise you I'm going to do a whole episode of where I've landed, why I've landed there, and all of that information will come as I'm ready to share it. So thank you again. I love you guys so much. I'm so grateful for your being a part of listening to my A Bit From Within, and I hope that has deeply connected to a bit from within you as well. So that's all for now. Until next time.